Welcome back to another episode of Game Time Discussions, guys. My name is Kamren Selby here with Imran Cuzzy. Today we're finishing up our prospect rankings that we have upcoming for the 2024 draft. Today we're covering the safety position, probably the weakest position of all. However, there are still some names that could be, day 2, day 3 contributors right away. That's why we wanted to cover about 6 names, a couple honorable mentions.
Yeah, it's at the bottom with running backs. At least with safeties, we have a true number one rather than a group of guys that could be considered number one like running backs do. You should go watch that video if you haven't yet. But this is a lackluster group of guys. Some are obviously going to be beneficial for teams, but they're more of depth pieces and guys that are going to necessarily have the elite traits to be the best safeties in the or nickels or wherever they decide.
It also doesn't help if you kind of group together just overall the top prospects in the nation in college football. The top 3 or 4 are probably returning to school,
right?
So you don't have the value up top. So definitely no first rounders in our eyes.
I don't. So both of the All-Americans from this year are actually returning, like you're talking about. So we're not going to see those guys in this class, but that means that next year's class is going to be strong. So the safety class will be one of the higher talking points in next year's class rather than where it is, in this class. So
right. So we'll kick it off with some honorable mentions. Today we're going to go over Javon Bullard out of USC, Sione Vaki out of Utah, and Bo Braid out of Maryland. Give us a little bit about each of those guys and
so Kalen Bullock is a really hard one for me to put. He's actually one of the hardest ones to rank because I've seen him, top 3. I've seen him, down here where he's at with us. I think we're probably behind consensus on him, but it's really hard when, you see the flashes of coverage skills and one high. He's got really good length. He's got the speed, but then you're like, but can he tackle at the next level? Because yes, he throws his body around at the NCAA level, but he is super thin, not very much meat on his bones type of guy. And so I worry that he won't be able to do those things. He's not necessarily a man coverage safety in any way. Like I said, he has good length though, so he'll be able to be on tight ends. He's a good one high kind of player, but I don't know that I see him being able to do similar things that he did at USC, where they rolled him into the box and all of a sudden he was trying to make tackles on, running backs, which sometimes he did, but they're not form tackles. They're throw your body in there trying to
right.
Get the guy.
And that was the whole problem with USC as a whole was just tackling. That's not all on him. Right. Because you can't be relying on your safeties to be your top tackler. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, it was just kind of a product of the environment in my eyes.
Yeah, they had some issues in other places that made them have to find a way to get guys like Kalen Bullock, who's just a really good athlete, on the field to make plays in those situations. But I worry that he can't do it at the next level. That's why he's here rather than some people have him at 3 because of his coverage skills. And I understand that also. It's just, I want to see him be more complete before I'm like, oh, you're a top 3 guy, when there are some guys later on who have shown that they can tackle and can cover pretty well. Maybe just not as good of athletes. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, and then we'll go Sione Vaki out of Utah.
Yeah, what a interesting story this guy is. He played running back first off, so he didn't just play safety. He played both running back and safety at Utah. He's actually a teammate of another guy on this list. One of the best pairings we've seen that we had this year at the safety position. But he's a big hitter, wants to come downhill, wants to, lay the wood. But he really doesn't have the frame or ability to play like a free or one high or two high. He's kind of constricted to a box, extra linebacker, big nickel type of player, which is fine if he had the coverage skills to play against slots and tight ends. But that's his biggest problem, is his coverage skills. He can tackle. He's the opposite. We basically have, Kalen Bullock is flipped of Sione Vake. That basically we're going to see him, making open field tackles, doing really well in that, but then not being able to cover underneath routes and stuff like that because he just lacks some of that lateral quickness and that athleticism to do that. But he's kind of like the junkyard dog of the class, I guess, like wants to get in there, wants to lay the wood, wants to get after you. So
the effort is not the question.
No, absolutely not. I mean, like I said, he played running back and safety. Like, he is there to win. Like, that's one thing, sometimes you just want winners on your team. This guy wants to win. And Utah had some really good players on their defense this year. So, he was one of the ones that stood out on film because of the fact that he makes those big splash hits, big splash plays in that way. While, he doesn't necessarily, like, you'll see him also get burnt the next play, which is really hard for you to be like, well, this guy has projection of being a box safety, but I worry that, the athleticism isn't there for him to cover because that caps his ceiling. Right. The coverage is what matters more at safety at the end of the day, truly. But, at the same time, you love the dog. You love the dog in the fight, right? So that's one of those.
Yeah, and then we'll wrap up our honorable mentions with Bo Braid, Maryland.
Yeah, Bo Braid. He was, so like I said earlier, the safety class is kind of like one of those classes where it's like hard to put everybody because we saw a lot of combine issues. We saw some, athleticism issues. Like I said before, we have the coverage guy versus the guy, the run stopping guy. And so Bo Braid actually missed, he was a box guy that had an 18.8 missed tackle rate. And so you think, in open field, it's really hard to make tackles. I get it. But when you get closer to the line of scrimmage, you'd expect that number to come down.
Right.
And his actually went up for the most part. He played a lot of his time in the box. He was nickel. He was a nickel. He was a rover type of safety, moved around a little bit. And so that I was expecting to turn into like a 12% missed tackle rate, not an 18% missed tackle rate. So that was surprising. And I think that that's actually what dropped him on this list mostly. It's not, he has the instincts, he has the physicality and the willingness to tackle, just doesn't always make the play. And that's very important to notice when you go from like the NCAA level to the NFL level. They're just going to get better. They're going to get quicker. And if you can't make the play at that level, it's going to be even harder, So that's kind of my thing with him.
Gotcha. So, yeah, we'll start off our rankings. We'll go with number 6, Kamren Kinchens out of Miami. This is a guy, if you started looking at mock drafts this time last year for the 2024 class, he would have been a first-round pick, top safety consensus in the class. And he's fallen all the way down outside of our top 5 just due to a rough year. And Combine, we talked and touched on a little bit. He probably hurt himself more than any other player. So kind of give us a little bit about him. There is some upside to him, but tell us why we've dropped him as low as we have.
Well, I mean, most boards, it's either him or the number 1 guy, like you said at the beginning of the year. And then he didn't play bad, I guess. I don't know that, like, I want to, like, he didn't play bad, but you saw on film and the combine confirmed the fact that he doesn't have the speed to keep up with, these higher level players. And so it kind of tells me, though, at the same time, it's like, say you have a, this is our biggest draft faller from the combine. Like, if you go watch our video, this is the biggest draft faller. We have a video on it for all the prospects. And it's because, he didn't show any speed. 4.65 is awful for the safety position. Didn't show the explosiveness in the jumps. And then also, like, when you watch the film and you put those things together, when you draft this guy, where are you putting him at the next level? That's the biggest problem, because he's a good football player, and football players are good to have on the team. But where do you put him? Do you put him at safety? Now you're, if he's a high safety, you're like, okay, but you can't get there. 4.65 is not going to get, across the field in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Do you put him at nickel? Okay, well, now he loses in quickness immediately. You know, if he goes against Lad McConkey from the same class, he's getting burnt every route because he can't compete with the quickness. So is he a situational box safety that makes tackles on third down or on like first and second down and then comes off every, it's really hard to pencil him into being comfortable. Like, where does this guy go? And where does he thrive position wise at the next level,
Yeah, so I guess one question I do have, I know we touched on Terry Arnold at the corner position when, he was one of the league leaders or nation leaders in interceptions, but
Right.
most of them were tip balls. Obviously, Kinchens has the same amount of interceptions. Was that more ball skills? Was that kind of situational, just being in the right spot?
So he actually does have solid ball skills. That's not the problem either. But the ball skills compared to being in the right place is the problem, right? So sometimes he reads the route and he jumps it and there's your interception, right? Like, that's like a normal way you see interceptions happen. And then sometimes like a couple I remember, like one of them was a big deep throw. He just ran down basically. And I'm like, okay, well that was good. He can't consistently do that though. 82% completion rate this last year. And it's like, okay, so he has 5 interceptions. Probably, I think that's the most in this class for safeties in this group at least. And he's also giving up 82% of the passes coming his way or caught. So it's like, I don't know. Like, it's bad. Basically, it's all bad. No matter if it's all good, like if he has good ball skills when he gets there, he has to get there, and he doesn't. He doesn't, as you can tell. Like that's the biggest problem. He gave up 4 touchdowns. Also, he doesn't have a high missed tackle rate, but I don't see that going down at the next level. And 13% to 14% isn't good. It's just okay.
Right.
So
yeah, he's just kind of one that we feel like the combine should have dropped him more than he has, and we don't feel like it has enough. And if he was a 3rd, 4th round pick or 5th even, that's a guy that's like, okay, that's a good breaking piece. But if you're having to invest a day 2 pick, it's kind of harder to justify that based on what he's shown us.
The football ability is there, like we talked about. Like, he is a good football player. That is why he was consensus number 1 or number 2 before the year. But you going to another level of athleticism, like when you go from the NCAA to the NFL, there's just so much more. You cannot mess up. Like, every step, your steps have to be perfect. And if you don't, so say you ran a 4.4, you can make up those steps, rather than if you run a 4.6, you have to make every step has to be perfect, or you are never going to get there. And there are plays, obviously, where he does not get there. And 4 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. That looks good on paper, but
right. So yeah, we'll move on. Going on to Jaden Hicks. He's a guy that's a taller, bigger safety. Honorable mention Pac-12. Redshirt sophomore coming out. He did come out early. Give us a little bit about him and.
So Jaden Hicks is a fun player in the fact that he is the big hitter of the class. Like the 6'2", 211, like you don't really see that as often at the safety position. And like, he's going to come down and he wants to lay the wood. Could even end up being a linebacker at the end of the day.
Because he has this modern day size for it.
Right. And he's got this, I think he's got more of this like build and speed style to a linebacker than a safety, honestly. He's comfortable though. He was very comfortable in all the positions. He kind of had, so basically the first half of the year he was really impressive. And then towards the second half of the year, not that he fell off, but he just didn't make those same like splash plays, I guess. We didn't talk about him. Like, you watch the games, you don't actually talk about him as much, which is good as a safety. You don't want actually to hear about a guy at safety, because normally it's bad things. Right. But 66% completion rate, not good as the primary defender. For being as built the way his build is, having 14.7 missed tackles, playing in the box as much as he did, I didn't like that. It's because he does not know how to slow down. We talk about with Devin White. We've had this conversation before on the podcast. It's like Devin White is one speed all the time, and he does not know how to make the tackle when it's like right there in front of him because he'll just run past it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the same problem with Jaden Hicks. I think that can be fixed. That's one of those things I'm like, okay, that can be fixed. He has the speed, he has the athleticism. For the add the size to it, it's like, okay, well, this is a big nickel, but can he play 3 downs? I don't know. That's my biggest problem. Can he be on the field 3 downs, and give you good production? Because if you know they're going to run the ball, he's a guy you want on the field.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't know that, it's like, is he a little bit of a liability? Well, yeah. So that's kind of my thing with him. But he's a redshirt sophomore. We don't have an age on him. I don't know why we can't get the age for some of these guys, but he's young is what I'm trying to get at. And he's, got a lot of room to grow, especially the fact that he already has the physical tools to do these things. I am excited to talk about the next guy because they're very similar in that way. But yeah, I think that Jaden Hicks is, just needs to. He didn't run the 40 either, which I think is a bad thing because I wanted him to run the 40 and get a 4.45, low 4.5, because then I didn't have the questions of, okay, is he fast enough to do this? But
yeah, so we'll move right on over. Cole Bishop is our number 4 safety. One thing that's interesting, if you look at the graphic that we have up for him, one of the better completion percentages we've seen, lower missed tackle rates, very athletic. He has size, yet PFF, he just really did not knock it out of the ballpark. And obviously PFF is not gospel, but when you're not top 500 at your own position, that's kind of glaring, so to speak.
Right.
Give us a little bit about him, and should we expect more optimism? Obviously, he's our number 4 safety.
Well, he's also really big, 6'2", 205, 206 at the combine. Did run the 40, ran a 4.45. Like you said, 54% completion rate, 13% missed tackle rate. Well, that's actually a really big story to tell. This is his second year playing safety ever. He went, he moved positions basically. And Utah likes doing that. I don't know why. They like moving people from one position to another. But so he moves positions, goes from an 18 plus missed tackle rate last year to a 13. So we're seeing that improvement, which is great to see, especially when you've only played the position. This is your second year. He is like the perfect build. You know what I mean? Like he has perfect body proportions. The only big, if we're going to talk about body proportions, his arms are a little short. Okay. But he has good body proportions. He, really fluid, athlete. Kind of the reason he's above Jaden Hicks is because he can play way more positions, more versatile. I think he's a 3-down player if he does hit that ceiling. But he has the lowest floor also. It's one of those guys where you have a really low floor, but the ceiling is there and you can see it, and you're hoping you can grab a little bit of that. So that's why. PFF, I don't know why they didn't like him as much. I think he was pretty solid. He's a physical guy. He's willing to play in the box. He actually is a pretty good edge rusher. One of those safeties that randomly gets to go off the edge that, he had 3 sacks last year. 12 pressures, I believe. So he can do that part too, which is cool. Just a really versatile guy that has a lot of upside. And I don't think you can put him behind other guys that have issues and don't have as much upside. When he has issues, of course, he's got his own, issues. But if I'm like, pick a guy in this class that I want to go cover a tight end, I'm picking Cole Bishop because he's got the size, he's got the, physicality, those things that you have to have. And so that's kind of why he's so high. I think he's actually a lot lower on most people's boards. But this is a projection-based pick. If he hits his ceiling, he might be too low, is how I look at it.
Gotcha. So, yeah, we'll go and crack our top 3. Got Tykee Smith out of Georgia, One thing that stands out that I noticed of him was just his high pass coverage rate.
Mm-hmm.
Really impressive, especially based on the size that he has. But he is one of the older players in this ranking. Um, give us a little bit about him. Is he more of a product of his environment, or is he somebody that can really kind of stand out on his own?
So I don't believe that he's a product of his environment because he actually is a transfer from West Virginia originally.
Okay.
Where in 2019 he was freshman All-American. 2020 he was an All-American, true All-American, and then he got injured, and that's why he had to transfer to Georgia from West Virginia instead of going into the draft the next year, which is where we would have hoped would have happened, kind of thing with him. That's why he's a little older. But he is the best safety that will play nickel, if that makes sense. So our cornerbacks video, there's some nickels from the cornerbacks position that are probably better, but Tykee is the best like true safety that played safety in college that will be moving to a nickel position. Nickel is becoming one of the commodities in the league, and being able to be a really good run defender and cover CeeDee Lamb is something you have, like, all teams want, and I think Tykee's actually really solid at both. He's a really smooth player in and out of breaks. You kind of have to be lateral quickness to play nickel, and then also he is a pretty good tackler, which is something that for his size I didn't know that I expected. He's a pretty good tackler for that. Playing for Georgia makes it a little easier sometimes. You're not necessarily targeted. They had 5 DBs, I feel like. They have DBs everywhere, basically, that are really good at football. And so I think that might have been a little bit helpful, but he had done it prior. So I don't know that I think that was his own, like a crutch almost. But yeah, I mean, he has played outside corner. He's played deep safety. He's played nickel. He's played it all. He's just a veteran. One of those things. You're going to pick this guy because he can help you right now.
Right.
Veteran savvy. He will never probably hit the ceiling of some of the other guys, but some of those guys may just hit their floor. So you're going to at least get a high floor guy that knows how to play football and has a little bit of those nuances that you don't see with some of these younger guys. So
yeah, and so going to number 2, we got Javon Bullard, another SEC safety that is actually a year and a half younger, but has a lot of similar traits. Very good in pass coverage, similar size, basically the same 40, and PFF graded as well. He also has one of the lowest missed tackle rates on this list as well. So give us a little bit about him. He is a project, but he has a lot of youth on his side as well.
Yeah, I played basically next to Tykee Smith. They also had another safety that was an All-American. They also have a corner that is on our top corners list. So yeah, Georgia just has a group of guys every year that are all pretty good at football. But 4.47, really solid. 40. No touchdowns given up this year, and 2 interceptions. I think the best way to put all these Georgia guys, like, they're just consistent across the board. They don't make mistakes. They just are, in the right place at the right time. Good football players. One of the biggest pro for me was, so we normally talk about versatility as position versatility. He's got good position versatility. His coverage versatility is actually the thing that really stood out. He's a solid man coverage guy, and he's solid zone. And sometimes that's hard to find, right? Like, sometimes you're really good at zone. Kalen Bullock, like we talked about before, and that's basically your bread and butter, and you need to go to a fit that allows you to do that. With him, you don't need that fit. He can basically play 3 positions, high free safety, strong safety, or even, I don't know that I would put him in nickel, but if you had to, don't think it's the worst option. And then also, he can play man and zone. Like, those types of versatilities, he can play in any defense, and you're not gonna have any, like, fall off. Basically, he's not going to be a liability on the field, and so that's a really big deal when you pick a guy too. 21, almost 22 years old, basically, when the season starts. Just like I said, solid player. He was only honorable mention all SEC, though. This is our number 2 player. He was only honorable mention at all SEC. So that kind of tells you the difference in skill versus like some other positions or even just other years with this position class, you know.
Right. And then going to our number 1 spot consensus, Tyler Nubin. Incredible numbers that he put up: 30% completion percentage, 5 interceptions, one of the highest cover grades, top 10 safety, first team All American. You know, all across the board, he just lit it up last year.
Yeah. Full package, right? That's kind of how I wrote that down. That's literally the answer. This is the full package safety.
Mm-hmm.
He has the best ball skills in the class, and then to tie that in, doesn't miss tackles. I mean, that's basically the recipe that you want for all safeties, I feel like. And then you can add some hitting, you know, then you add the hitting, but truly you hope your safety doesn't have to make that many tackles. And so in pass defense, he gave up a 39.6 QBR. 39.6 QBR is what he gave up when he was the primary defender.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty awesome. He had a 20% forced incompletion rate. Out of 1 out of 5, he was knocking down, or I guess picking off.
Right.
So he just basically has it all: good footwork, good IQ, range and versatility. You know, that's one thing too, is like he's kind of a chess piece because he could play cover too. He'd probably be really good at it. He can play cover 1. He can get across the field. I really wish he would have ran at the combine because I wanted to see how fast he was. And also, I personally think he's a back into the first round talent that's not going to go there.
Right.
So if he would run at the combine, that could have been solidified almost, because I think he's probably a top 30 player.
Mm-hmm.
And being a top 30 player is really cool, but if you're at a position that isn't necessarily a big need in most teams, and also like isn't a commodity position, it's not the positional value, you kind of need to show out so that you can be a first rounder when you're on that like cusp. It's kind of like Peyton Wilson for NC State. He showed out, and it put him in that like conversation that he could be right there at the first pick at the second round, you know, in that area. Tyler Nubin needed to do that because even safety is more positional value than linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
And he could have been, you know, first linebacker or first safety off the board to a team at the end of the draft that's like, we really just want the guy that's going to, you know, that's the guy. We want him. He is great in pass coverage. He's good at tackling. And he's our final piece that we need to make the jump.
Mm-hmm.
And he just didn't do that. And that's one of those things where I'm like, okay, you got to bet on yourself a little bit here. So
right, yeah. And then once again, I wanted to bring up a little bit. There's only about 12 to 15 players every year that have true first round grades.
right,
Everybody after that, but that's the whole back half of the first round, are second round talents that are being pushed up, and their projection and you're on upside.
right.
But this year, it's even deeper in terms of the second round caliber talent.
Mm-hmm.
So there's maybe the 15 through 40 or even 45 that could be considered a first round talent. But because there's so many quarterbacks, there's so many receivers, there's so many tackles even, that there's players at other positions like Peyton Wilson, like you said. Tyler Nubin is another example that just are getting pushed down. So early, mid-second round is probably where his range is. And even if somebody did take a chance on the first round, like I've seen a couple mocks, have him be a 29th or the 31st pick, I don't think that we're going to look at that and be like, oh, that's a little bit of a reach.
No, yeah, and I think that's probably where he, in a normal year, he's a 29 to 32 pick. This year, it's just, there's actually, and we talked about this before, like you said, 12 to 15 first round grades. I think it's deeper than that.
Yeah,
Great first round. There's probably 16, 17 that you could really make a case for. And then that just pushes people back even more. Then you take into account the fact that positional value is important, and you have to make sure that you get, the pieces at the right positions to make your team really whole. That's what we have in this class. We have a lot of depth at tackle. We'll probably see, 9 offensive linemen go in the first round. I guess probably 9. I guess 9, 8 or 9. You're going to see 5, 6, 7 receivers. You're going to see 5, 6 quarterbacks. So there's just not as much room. So you have to put yourself out there and go make those, at the combine, at the pro days, at those things where you really make yourself stand out. Because he stood out. I mean, he sat behind Antoine Winfield Jr. from the place for Tampa Bay, who is one of our favorite safeties. And he played with him, and he learned a lot. And you can see some of those things. He's a different style of player, but they have put out really good safeties at Minnesota for these last few drafts, and he just should have pushed, I guess is how I would put it.
But that could always help you fall into the right situation too. So.
Right.
But yeah, guys, with that being said, we have wrapped up our safety rankings and our positional rankings as a whole.
Yep.
We appreciate you guys tuning in, standing out with us as we've gone through each of these guys. Hopefully you get a better idea of the class in general, some of the bigger names and what to expect. Thank you. Can't thank you enough for the support you guys have had us do so far. And we just hope that we can keep on continuing to grow as we lead up the draft.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. We're going to do we're planning to do a live stream for the draft, just the first day. I think that, after that we'll do recap videos for those days, but, we're going to release we just released a what would we do mock draft, which is basically where we go in and we decide, if we were the GMs, if we want to trade back or if we want to trade up or if we want this position, and we don't necessarily follow what will happen draft day. We do what we think is best for each team. We just finished that. So there's a lot of stuff coming out too. So it's an exciting time. We're getting really close. We're 18 days away. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. So yeah, we're getting right there. So yeah, it's getting exciting.
Yeah. We'll have a little bit more content coming out in terms of the draft, but then even as the draft ends up, we'll do some recaps, and then that's when all the fun stuff comes out. We're going to have a bunch of new uniforms that people are debuting around draft week. There's the schedule release comes out, I believe, right before the draft. Mm-hmm. And, we got to react to that because that helps paint a picture with how we see the 2024 season going. And then there's going to be the way too early.
Yeah.
Picks, rankings, all that nonsense that are just so fun to talk about.
Yeah,
so
fantasy will be right on the horizon at that point.
But yeah, keep tuning in. Like, subscribe. Look in the link tree below. Please follow us on all our socials. We just had a really well-known reporter retweet one of our tweets last week, and he got over 45,000 views, which was a big deal. First time that's happened, and we've only been doing this for about a month and a half. So It's pretty cool. It's gonna keep on going and growing. So please be a part of it while you.
It's funny that you say that is because it feels like we've been doing this for a long time now.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we have done this in the past, of course, but not at this level and not on camera. But yeah, so it feels like we've been recording for, I don't know, 6 months, and maybe that's just, the intenseness of this time of year where we have so much to talk about. But at the same time, it's like, we've been recording for a month and a half. Like, it's all coming together really fast. So yeah, exciting. But we really appreciate y'all for being here. Like Cam said, like, comment, subscribe for sure. And we will see y'all next time.
Yeah. Take care.